as Dr. Paul leaned over to finish up the hours-long brain surgery. His back was on fire. And he didn't think much of it. He expected that his body would be kind of sore and hurting after a 9-hour surgery. But once he finished the surgery, he was in so much pain, he had to sit down. Unfortunately for Paul, the pain continued to get worse and worse. It hurt to breathe, it hurt to move, and finally he went to another doctor, and the CT scan showed that he had cancer. It was all in his lungs, infused on his spine. Paul, who was in his late 30s, was too young to get cancer. He looked back on his life and how he had gone to college and gotten his master's and gone to med school, and he was just getting ready to wrap up his time in residency as a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist. He had job offers coming in from all across the states. I mean, these were great job offers. And he was getting ready to step into the career where he believed he could make a huge difference when it comes to brain health. And he had saved so many lives already through his brain surgeries. He was one of the best residences in the whole hospital. And now he had a rare, aggressive form of cancer. And he decided to fight it. Him and his wife, they pushed through. Paul was able to go through rounds of treatment, come back and do more brain surgeries. But the cancer just wouldn't go away. They decided to have a child. And when his young daughter was 8 months old, Paul was holding her on his chest on his deathbed, surrounded by friends and family. During the months of his cancer, he wrote a book called When Breath Becomes Air. It became a New York Times bestseller. And if you read the book, you can follow along his story, and you can't help but wonder why. It just seems so unfair. I mean, here's a great man who was doing great things, who had worked so hard and was so close, only to be struck down by cancer and leave a beautiful young wife and a beautiful young girl. When you hear stories like that, there's no easy explanation. It's like reading the book of Job. You know, Job, he was rich and he had a big family, and then Satan attacks him, and then one day he loses it all. He loses all of his wealth, all of his children. He loses his health, and he has these friends that come and sit with him, and then they start to berate him. They start to say, well, you know, bad things like this only happen to bad people. You know, Job, you tricked us. We thought you were a good man, but obviously you have some kind of sin and God is punishing you. You need to get rid of the sin in your life, because look around, Job. If you have bad people, bad things happen in their lives. Look at those people doing all those unhealthy things. They get sick. Look at those people being terrible to their families. It creates pain. And Job says, he says, well, it doesn't always work out that way. What about the wicked people who are very rich, who have family members who love them? What about the evil people who go into the grave and people speak lies over them and talk about how wonderful they were? He's like, you know, it doesn't always work out the way that you guys say. He says, there is no unconfessed sin in my life. I haven't earned this tragedy. And people don't like the book of Job because it goes against our deep desire to be able to control our lives. I mean, we believe, like, you know, if we just eat right and pay tithe and do what we're supposed to do, we'll never get cancer. We'll always have a good life. You know, you read stories about this Dr. Paul and you wonder if there was something that he was doing that brought on the cancer. Somehow was it his fault? And we want it to be his fault because we don't want to believe that sometimes we can get hit by a bus at no fault of our own. But that's how life works sometimes. Sometimes good people get sick. sometimes wonderful people experience tragedy. And in those moments, we got to wonder, why? Now, in the story of Paul, we do get to see behind the curtain. In the story of Job, we get to see behind the curtain, and we see that Satan was causing all of this tragedy, even though Job didn't know. Job and his friends were blaming God. But Job gives us a clue. He says, even though he will slay me, speaking about God, Job says, I will trust in him. You see, there's no cookie cutter formula to force God to bless us financially. There's no cookie cutter formula to force God to heal us, to force God to give us what we want and the life that we want. Now, there are things that we can do that have positive consequences. There are things that we can do to make our lives better, but it doesn't guarantee we'll never get a positive test result, or that our spouse won't leave us, that our kids won't disappoint us. You see, the only guarantee in life is that God will love you no matter what. It's that Jesus said, I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Many times we believe God is with us when life is good, and God has forsaken us when life is bad. And that is not true. The truth is, God is with you when you're getting your chemotherapy treatment, just as much as he's with you when you've got a deep belly laugh surrounded by your friends. It's a hard thing to understand, and I don't completely grasp the whole thing, but the story of Job is beginning to teach me that when life doesn't turn out the way that I want it to turn out, it's not necessarily my fault. It could just be that we live in a world where tragedy happens. And when I face tragedy, I need to choose to trust in God. And that's when it's the hardest, but that's when we need it the most. And so today, my friend, whenever something bad happens, or maybe you're going through a bad thing, or something bad's coming down the pipe, I don't know, choose to trust in God. Let go of our human desire to explain everything and to build a formula to make sure nothing bad ever happens again. Sit with Job and learn the lesson. Though he slay me, yet I will trust in him. You see, Job shows us that even in tragedy, God's got this. God bless.